Comm 101. Thanks for being here. Last week we talked about Marjorie Taylor Greene getting into a fight with an AI bot called Grok on the platform formerly known as Twitter. This week, the nation is seeing the president and the owner of said platform, Elon Musk, get a national divorce, I guess. They're spewing hate at each other back and forth. They're stating things that we already knew. Things like Elon gets a ton of government contracts and subsidies, and that the president is in the Epstein files. Okay, so let's go back again to then why Elon Musk bought Twitter to begin with. He claimed, as you remember, that he wanted civilization to have a common digital town square. And that's totally fair. I'm not one for censorship myself, but there is something to be said for just blithely spewing BS into the universe and pretending it's fact, or ignoring the source from whence the information came. We live in a global information age. We also live in an age where no one thinks they need to apologize for things like, I don't know, saying that one of the British divers that helped save the Thai soccer team was a pedophile. Now, in his defense, Elon will claim that he apologized, but what he really said was, I said things in anger, and that pedo guy is an insult where he grew up in South Africa, and not that he meant pedophile in earnest. But he never actually said, I'm sorry, that man is not a pedophile. I was being a jealous ass. But I digress. So the information wars are at least a part of the reality of why Elon bought Twitter. And that leads us back to kind of why I started Comm 101. The importance of real journalism and understanding media. I think it's great to have people in the community out getting stories if they can and if they're motivated to, and trying to make a difference. I mean, I'm not a journalist. I'm just a person that has worked with journalists. I just feel compelled to be doing this, and I'm doing research. But trained professionals that understand the ethics of what they're doing is always the best route here. It helps to avoid scandal. Now, it doesn't prevent it. Obviously, we can see that from... But there tends to be consequences for the bad actors in these cases. And it helps prevent global disinformation when people who are trained to do a job and to specialize in that job are allowed to get paid to, do that job. I listened to a great podcast from a few weeks ago from Semaphore Media, who, as a company, has had some scandals, at least minor, of their own having to do with their funding. But it's the Mixed Signals podcast. I'll link to the episode in the notes of the YouTube page. In this episode, the host interviewed possibly the most well-known foreign correspondent of our generation, Christiane Amanpour, and her ex-husband and former State Department official, Jamie Rubin, about their new podcast, The X-Files. Christiane had raised a point in the discussion that foreign correspondents are still very necessary, even vital, to this global information age, where, yes, we can certainly translate a local reporter's work from Farsi or Mandarin into English, but because that local reporter is maybe in Kyiv or Gaza, that person might not get the global exposure needed to highlight the story in this landscape. We can, of course, try to interview those people on global news networks like CNN, and we should, because their voices need to be heard and should be heard because they're on the ground doing the reporting in earnest. But by sending our own human resources from CBS and ABC and CNN and MSNBC out to the front lines, the way she was herself during the Balkan Wars, she was sent to Bosnia, we can expose more people to the unfiltered truth and help, hopefully, show the democracies of the world why some places need our help. She said, "What I'm saying is that I believe, and I think it's true, that if we're trying to get these stories out to a bigger part of the world, with a bigger throw weight and force, world leaders and all those people who could make a difference to take notice, they have to be told by not just local journalists, but also by international journalists. I'm not saying either or, I'm saying also." She went on to note that perhaps part of the reason the wars in both Ukraine and Gaza have been prolonged is because journalists have been blocked from these war zones by the Russian and Israeli, and in some cases, even the Ukrainian governments. Jamie echoed her point and noted that during his tenure at the State Department, he had been encouraging the Ukrainian government to allow reporters at the front lines, not just near the front lines. He wanted reporters to be able to interview soldiers not just after attacks had occurred, but to be able to show people exactly what was happening in real time, because we have the opportunity to do this like almost never before because of the technology that we have at our disposal. But Russia doesn't want any media that's not pro-Russia almost anywhere in the country. Israel feels the same way, and the Ukrainians are afraid of reporting their casualties. Jamie's last stint at the State Department under the Biden administration included the Global Engagement Center. And this is a point of contention in the global information wars. The department, the Engagement Center, is now defunct within the Trump administration. And it goes back, I think, at least perhaps to why Elon would want to buy Twitter. On the State Department Archives website, we can find the GEC mission statement. And it is to direct, lead, synchronize, integrate, and coordinate U.S. federal government efforts to recognize, understand, expose, and counter foreign state and non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts aimed at undermining or influencing the policies, security, or stability of the United States, its allies, and partner nations. And so, what the center did was try and crack down on propaganda, particularly Russian and Chinese propaganda. But let's not forget that a few weeks back, I talked about how a man named Tim Pool was invited to be part of the White House press pool. He was allegedly paid to spread Russian propaganda during the 2024 election. And that, of course, leads us back to the problem as Republicans have seen it. Much Russian propaganda, and Chinese for that matter, is routed through American voices. The Republicans don't want Americans censored. I don't want anybody censored. I personally just want the curtain to come down on who is who and who is being paid by who, and for all the robots to go away, because I am not here in any way for our robot overlords. As Jamie said, the Global Engagement Center was the hardest single subject I have ever worked on in my life. But there was, as he discovered, a way to manage the problem, to crack down on global disinformation. He said, "Our battle is in the hidden hand. Anyone can say anything as long as it's sourced, labeled, and the provenance of that information is known." So, this Global Engagement Center, now defunct, meant in part to battle global disinformation, might be useful for someone like President Trump, this week anyway. Maybe he'd be able to stop Elon, an immigrant who abused the student visa system by working illegally while on his visa, and thus becoming an illegal immigrant in the late 90s, from spreading the totally sourceable and fact-check information about him. Real information is important, and knowing where that information came from is equally important, if for no other reason than it won't make us look like idiots. Christiane also reminded us that nothing is achieved by keeping the curtain of darkness and ignorance. We have to break the silence. We have to tell these stories. And by doing so, we can remind people that there are real life solutions to the peace processes and to the myriad of other problems that plague our global societies. There are treaties that exist In Ireland, there's the Oslo Accords. And these came because people fought for them and because they could see the truth in front of their eyes, and sometimes as told by professional journalists and diplomats. Thanks for watching. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. See you next week.